Welcome one, welcome all to Supreme 7-Star Draft League Season 2 Award Ceremony. We are here to honor the Pokemon, the teams, the coaches who did the best here in Season 2's regular season right before we get into the playoffs. Let's just get going. First of all, quick overview of what we're going to go over, very similar to last season. Kill leaders and the standings, then the all teams, the all defensive teams, the All-SSSDL teams, the individual awards, and then something new, we're going to go over some of the preseason bets I had you guys fill out on Google Forms earlier this season to see what came to fruition and what didn't. So, starting with our standings, look at them. We've got Wacka atop 7-1 plus 21, ties exactly the same as Steven had last season, 7-1 plus 21. Back-to-back seasons where our one seeds are the same. And then we've got Ryan, our third ever 7-1 team, coming in 7-1 plus 12, followed by Abastia after a big turnaround. Didn't make the playoffs last season, and he goes 6-2 this season. Great stuff. Sam is our number 4 team, the Ghost City Go-Goats at 5-3. Great season from him. Y-Stream, one of our new coaches, our first new coach to make a playoffs, goes 5-3 as well. And then rounding off our playoffs, we got our 3 4-4 teams. Me, McGriddleso, and Phoenix scoots in there after missing last season. So really cool stuff. And then, of course, our teams that didn't quite make the playoffs. Unfortunately, Squidbird didn't. Goes 3-5, but I think there's a lot to be said about finishing 3-5 with the team you're picking up mid-season at 1-3. And really, not having a team you're comfortable with, having to fix it. So, first of all, very thankful to Squidbird for picking up the team and handling everything as well as you did and as maturely as you could with everything going down. I appreciate it. Next, we got John at 3-5. I believe he went 3-5 last season as well. Wisdom at 3-5. Dunkasino at 2-6. Power Fable at 2-6. And rounding it out, the trooper himself this season is going to be Chickadee at 1-7. I mean, 1-7 minus 11 tells a story by itself. The fact that he would have been number 11 in differential definitely says something there. I think Chickadee got a little unlucky this season, but we'll see how that goes in the future. So, looking at our kill leaders, of course, the big news, the elephant in the room, is that Chien Pao has broken the single season record for kills in a season with 17 this season. Sam, the number 1 overall pick, takes Chien Pao and picks up 17 KOs this season, which breaks our kill leader last season was Lapras, who I believe was 13. And then next we've got Sinistcha at 13, Ogerpon at 12, Great Tusk at 11, Thundy T at 10, Volcanion at 10, and Florges at 10. Interestingly enough, last season we didn't have any Pokemon finish with 9 KOs, and same thing goes this season. It goes from 10 to 8. And then overall, I just think it's interesting to note there was about 40 more total KOs throughout the league this season than there was last season. I think there's a couple reasons for that. 1, there was less forfeits this season. Great stuff. Proud of you guys. And 2, I think the games were just closer and differential a lot of the time. We had a lot of 4-4 close playoff matchups, a lot of low diff games, and I think that equals more KOs throughout the entire league. So, cool stuff. And now moving on to the all-defensive first team. Starting with Florges from Wacka's A Chilling Reception, Klefki from Ryan's Regi Spice, Fortress from Sam's Go City Go-Goats, Galarian Slowbro from Dunkasino's Blue Fishes, Porygon 2 from Wisdom's Atlanta Braviaries, and Quillfish from Wacka's A Chilling Reception. Wacka has 2 Pokemon make all-defensive first team. I believe that is the first time that has happened, so shout out to him. But just going over these mons, of course, remember, there's no order for this, and, these teams don't always go based off exact stats. I try and provide some context and reasoning for why they were voted into these spots by me. Florges, I don't think needs that much of an explanation. Florges was fantastic this season, was a matchup in prep for a lot of people I know, and was a big special wall and very hard to break, and I saw it do great things this season, and it wasn't run offensively too much, and it still managed to rack up a lot of KOs. Klefki for Ryan, I do think needs some context, because I do believe it finished with 0 kills and like 4 or 5 deaths. But it was truly great. Came to all 8 games on a team that went 7-1. So I think that says a lot about Klefki and its performance this season. But, Klefki fills all of those utility roles, and it's hard for it to get KOs at all. So I truly believe Klefki deserves a spot here. Fortress for Sam. It was his primary defensive backbone. FizzDef especially ran a lot of counter. Very cool stuff there. Galarian Slowbro, I think, is also an underrated defensive mon. For Dunkasino, I think this thing, I saw this when I was watching back the tape. G-Bro was in there doing the dirty work. I saw him go down to 5 HP 10 times. He got frozen 2 times. Definitely one of the more unlucky mons, but this was a Terra Cap, and I think Dunk used it great. And as a team that I think was a little bit more defensively frail, I think G-Bro filled that hole, and that's why he could win a couple of games. Porygon 2 for Wisdom, another team that struggled a little more, but I think Porygon 2 was really the shining spot on this team. Had multiple games where it was just a defensive menace, especially against Y-Stream. Porygon 2 was really in its finest performance there, and it was good in a handful of other weeks too. Porygon 2 had a great season. Quillfish for Waka, some people may say there was another Pokemon on Waka's team that deserved to be first team over Quillfish, but as I went back and watched the tape, Quillfish was in there doing the work. Quillfish, I think, was definitely one of Waka's best defensive Pokemon, and I think it earned a spot here on first team. Waka used it greatly, and Quillfish is a pretty underrated Pokemon and definitely deserves to be here on All Defensive first team. So now, All Defensive second team, we've got Dragalge from Abastia's Hearthome Haunters, Mega Aggron from Waka's A Chilling Reception, Bronzong from Jaden's Pearl City Pink Urchin, Regirock from Chickadee's Indonesian Infernapes, Archaludon from Sam's Ghost City Go-Goats, and Alolan Muck from Y-Stream's Aussie Arcanines. Dragalge is definitely a fun pick. I think Abastia didn't draft very traditionally defensive or bulky mons, so someone had to fill that role, and I think Dragalge filled that role, and I think the creativity of that, as well as his record, goes to show how powerful that was to have a strong defensive Pokemon. I think great stuff. I saw this thing run Max Fizdef a lot, or other investments, but definitely was a defensive pivot a lot throughout this season, which was really cool to see. Mega Aggron, some people may say this deserved first team, but I think Quillfish was a little better this season. Aggron was still great. Waka has 3 Pokemon make all defensive team, and I think that goes to show he was the #1 team, and he drafted a hell of a defensive core, and it worked for him quite well throughout the season. Mega Aggron makes it here in our second spot on the second team. Bronzong for me was my primary defensive backbone on my team. It was a Terra Cap. I used it in a lot of different Terras. It filled a lot of roles for me and helped check big threats. And it ran a variety of different investments: Spidef, Fizdef, AV, very cool stuff. I love Bronzong. Regirock, very similar for Chick. I think we knew coming into the season that Regirock was kind of the big defensive backbone for the Indonesian Infernapes. And of course, it had to fill that role. Of course, their season didn't go as planned, but I think Regirock still had a quite good season overall. And it scoots in here on the second team. Archaludon for Sam, also a Pokemon that doesn't necessarily have to be used defensively, similar to Dragalge, but Sam used it defensively most of the season. AV, Fizdef, Stamina. I saw it do a lot of things. I don't think I ever saw it click the Electro Cannon Shot Rain move though, but Sam didn't bring Rain that much anyways. But yeah, pretty strong defensive Pokemon. And then Alolan Muck, you guys know about Alolan Muck, one of the greatest AVers of all time. And you know, Y-Stream used it great. And it definitely, he had a pretty balanced team, and Alolan Muck was the shining defensive star to me. That being said, now we can look at the All-SSSDL Teams, the best 16 Pokemon this season. Starting with your first 6, we've got Sinistcha from Ryan's Red Dry Spice, Ogerpon Cornerstone from Abastia's Hearthome Hunters, Great Tusk from McGriddleso's Bronx Bombers, Chiampao from Sam's Ghost City Go-Goats, Volcanion from Jaden's Pearl City Pink Urchins, and Thunderous Therian from Waka's A Chilling Reception. Sinistcha for Ryan, the lowest tier on the first team. Same thing goes as last season. Ryan had the lowest tier on first team. Of course, this season Sinistcha is a Terra, so that is to be considered, but even considering that, it's still the lowest tier to make first team. But yeah, used a lot of different Terras, a lot of different setups to win. Calm Mind, Weakness Policy, Ryan used it great. Defensively even, and it racked up the second most KOs in the league. Ogerpon Cornerstone, the third most KOs in the league. Didn't come to week 1, came to every single game after that, had a great season, and was a big part of the reason Abastia was easily able to win so many games down the stretch. It had just a lot of times where it really popped off. Great Tusk for McGriddleso, really had 2 or 3 really big games and then was consistent in its other games. I know it was a hell of a problem for me to deal with. And this is also Great Tusk's second time making all first team. It made first team last season with Steven. Same thing goes for our next candidate, Chiampao for Sam's Ghost City Go-Goats. also made first team last season, and is back with McGriddleso, and is now here with Sam. Chien Pao, I don't think there's much to be said right now. Chien Pao has had a fantastic season and was our kill leader. So yeah, Volcanion for me was not the star I expected of my team, but Volcanion was fantastic throughout me for most of the season. It showed so much grit, so much determination, so much clutch, big burns off flamethrowers for me, defog, utility, defensive, offensive. I love Volcanion and I would recommend it to anyone. Thunder's Therian. I think it was hard to pick who Waka's best Mon was, but ultimately I decided it was Thundy T for a couple of reasons. It had a really strong start to the season, and was a kill leader very early. I believe it had like 5 KOs in week 2, or maybe it was 4 or 6. But huge like week 2, it was an MVP contender, and then it kind of started to fall off as it didn't come to as many games during the middle of the season. But towards the end of the season, it started becoming, it started filling a different role. It kind of adapted to a defensive role, or maybe more of like a utility pivot role. But I know it was being used as AV multiple times and allowed it to be, still rack up KOs while providing more defensive input for an already great defensive team. So that's what ultimately pushed me to say it was the best team on best Mon on Waka's team. Our second team we will move to starts with Iron Valiant from Phoenix's Toronto Typhlosion, Florges from Waka's A Chilling Reception, Porygon 2 from Wisdom's Atlanta Braviaries, Galarian Slowbro from Dunkasino's Blue Fishes, Mega Lopunny from Squidbird's Burgess Shell Shrimps, a little bit of a tongue twister for me, and then Urshifu Single Strike from Ryan's Reg Ice Spice. Iron Valiant, I think, was the highlight of, the first round pick was the highlight of Phoenix's squad, and led his team in KOs, I believe. I believe it was 8-4, and just had a great season. Slightly better than his season last season, but yeah. And then Florges, we already talked about a little bit on the defensive team, but was one of the strongest defensive Pokemon in the league. Picked up a lot of KOs. Definitely deserves to make it here on the second team. Porygon 2 for Wisdom. We also talked about this one on the defensive teams, but managed to rack up a lot of KOs, ran some heat, and did some big defensive things, and was the shining star of that Atlanta Braviary squad. Galarian Slowbro, once another one we've already talked about a little bit. Probably the most unlucky Mon this season, but it was fantastic throughout, and I do think it was the best part of the Blue Fishes this season. Shout out to Mikey Thomas, though. And then Mega Lopunny, with all the controversy that went on within the Shell Shrimps organization, Mega Lopunny was the shining star, finished with the most KOs on the team, and gave that team a real chance to make the playoffs down the stretch. And then Urshifu didn't come to as many games as a lot of these other Pokemon, but in the games it came to, it was highly efficient, and racked up a lot of KOs for the games it played, and that's why it's going to make it here on the second team. Moving on to the third team, we've got Jolteon from Sam's Go City Go-Goats, Melmetal from Avash's Hearthome Hunters, Goldango from Ystream's Aussie Arcanines, Darkrai from John's Edmonton Emolgas, Stakateka from McGriddle's Bronx Bombers, and Bronzong from Jin's Pearl City Pincurchins. Lots of steel types here, 4 steel types. Jolteon, while it didn't rack up the most KOs in the world, I do think in the games, as I was watching back some of the games, it really applied a lot of pressure, and there was a lot of times where Jolteon was the win con when Chien Pao couldn't be, or on certain Mons that Chien Pao can't break, Jolteon can break. I think it made a really great tandem with Chien Pao, even though a lot of the times they were both clicking ice moves. Melmetal for Abastia, I think statistically looked like one of his also better Mons, and it was often his 1B on his defensive, where Dragalge was that 1A. Melmetal was also right there taking many hits and dealing out big damage on also. Goldango for Ystream. It was definitely hard to pick what I thought Ystream's best Pokemon was, because his team was pretty balanced. A lot of Pokemon didn't come to that many games. It was very balanced, but I do think Dango stood out. It was an MVP candidate very early in the season, and it definitely transitioned to more of a utility defensive role as the season progressed, but it was still a very strong Pokemon throughout, and I think is very deserving of third team. Darkrai for John's Edmonton Emolgas finished as his kill leader, had a couple of very big weeks. I know for sure it had like 1 5K, but yeah, very strong, and allowed John to apply a lot of pressure as his high tier and win him some games. Stakateka, funnily enough, is actually only the third Pokemon to repeat making an All-SSSDL team last season, makes it again this season. Last season it was with Wisdom's Atlanta Braviaries. This season it's with McGriddle's Bronx Bombers. And it made third team last season. It makes third team this season as well. Was a fantastic Terra Cap this year, just as it was last year. And yeah, really was consistent throughout. And I know it gave me a hell of a lot of trouble. Speaking of me, we got Bronze on coming up the rear, the last mon to make it. I guess it's not really in order. I don't remember who was the last mon to make it. But Bronzong, like I said on the defensive teams, was one of the strongest defensive Pokemon on my team. Not to mention, it was one of the Pokemon that was able to actually rack up some KOs on my team. So definitely not an offensive slouch by any means. Now, with all that being said, we can get into the individual awards. We've actually got a couple new ones this year, but we will start with one we're a little familiar with. The Terra Captain of the Year. Your nominees are Sinistra from Ryan's Red Eye Spice, Slowbro G from Dunkasino's Blue Fishes, and Stakataka from McGriddle's Bronx Bombers, who we just talked about. All these mons were prolific Terra mons, but one stood out above the rest, and it is going to be Sinistra. I mean, it's hard to argue against 13 KOs compared to those other mons, and the fact that I do think Sinistra still provided defensive value, and I loved all the creative sets it ran, and it also came to all 8 games and got a KO in every single game it came to. Not to mention it was on the second seed, a team that went 7-1. I think a lot of that goes to show how prolific Sinistra was this season. Next, we've got the LVP, the least valuable Pokemon of the year. I'm sorry we got to dish this one out, but sometimes that is how it is. Someone has to be the winner or loser, depending on how you look at it. Your nominees are Mega Scizor from Power Fables Joltik Jewels, Tapu Fini from Power Fables Joltik Jewels, and Chi-Yu from McGriddle's Bronx Bombers. Definitely a little bit of context for Chi-Yu. Although its stats weren't the worst in the league, it did come to 7 games and only got 2 KOs. And mind you, those 2 KOs came in the last week against a team that was already playoff locked. So, I don't know, kind of on fraud watch. And then I'll give Mega Scizor a little bit of a break because it is a defensive pivot Pokemon. It doesn't always rack up KOs like that, and it can still apply some pressure without that. But the worst differential for a Pokemon with 0 kills, it's hard to not nominate it. And then Tapu Fini, the worst differential in the league, came to all 8 games. I know it was used offensively, and it still couldn't do anything. Your winner is Tapu Fini. We sent in the card to get signed by Tapu Fini, and she took a big fat steaming turd on the card this season, and that's understandable. But sometimes that's just how it is. But like I said, this thing was run weakness policy, life orb multiple times, and it just never got it going. It got 1 KO in week 1, and then it rattled off 8 deaths in a row without getting a KO. Not to mention, it was on a team that just didn't have that much success. It's hard to really justify it not being the LVP this season, especially all 3 of those mons were high tiers, but especially considering its point value, 1 in 8 is just unfortunate. Moving on to our next award, we've got Heat of the Year. Your nominees are Huge Power Porygon 2 from Wisdom in week 1, Weakness Policy Mr. Rhyme from Phoenix in week 6, and then Natural Gift Ice Flygon from Samkey in week 4. Porygon 2, of course, traced Huge Power from a Diggersby and KO'd it with Return in return, which was very cool, creative stuff, especially early in the season. Mr. Rhyme, Weakness Policy, gotta love it. Used Barrier and Freeze Dry to pick up a couple of KOs and secure a dub. And then Natural Gift Ice Flygon, I won't lie, came in 3rd in the voting here. So, hate to spoil you there, but I really think the other 2 stand out above Flygon. The voters thought so too. So it's between those 2. But Flygon was very cool, but just doesn't have quite as much juice as these other guys. Your winner is Mr. Ram for Phoenix's Toronto Typhlosions. We've actually got on the card here a game-worn piece of his weakness policy. This is the same weakness policy that activated. But you can see Terra Ice, +3 defense, +2 attack, +2 special attack. Bang! This thing was using Barrier, which I always think is funny. Slack Off. This thing clicked Slack Off like a quadrillion times. And then all it used was Freeze Dry the whole match. It just used Freeze Dry over and over, racked up a couple KOs. Couldn't quite secure the dub by itself, but it did secure the dub for the team. And you gotta love that Phoenix is always due to bring a wacky weakness policy once a season, so, keep your eye out for that. Last season it was Screamtail who was a nominee for Heat of the Year, but this season he will bring it home with Mr. Rhyme. Next, we've got Most Improved Pokemon, a new award. We've got our nominees as Tauros Blaze from Power Fibbles Joltik Jewels, Quillfish from Whack as a Chilling Reception, and Tornadus Therian from McGriddleso's Bronx Bombers. This award goes for the Pokemon who did the worst last season, who improved the most to this season. Tauros Blaze was like 1-4 last season. Quillfish was 0-1, only came to 1 game, and Tornadus T was on my team, came to like 7 games and was like 2-5. So big improvements for all of these guys, but one of them is going to be our most improved, and it's going to be Tornadus Therian for McGriddleso. As you can see, last season, same amount of games from this season to last season, but it picked up 6 KOs over 2, and then only had 3 deaths over 5. Of course, Tornadus T was an impactful part of my playoff run and helped me win the championship. So hopefully, maybe it can do the same for McGriddleso. I don't know about hopefully, but maybe it can. And it's going to be our most improved Pokemon this season, going from 2 to 6 KOs. I think that's big stuff. And so, yeah. Our next award, another new award, we got Rookie of the Year. I could have had this last year, but I didn't think it made much sense because everyone is a rookie. This award, if you don't know how it operates, is going to the best Pokemon who wasn't drafted last season. Well, I guess in the future it'll be any season, a Pokemon that wasn't drafted any season before. So these are your nominees: Ogerpon Cornerstone for Abash's Hearthome Haunters, Sinistra for Ryan's Regispice, and Volcanion from Jaden's Pearl City Pincurchins. All of these Pokemon were top 6 in kill leaders, and of course you can see they all had 10 or more KOs, came to 6 and more games. All these Pokemon were fantastic, but we can only have one winner. Your Roddy Rookie of the Year is Ogerpon Cornerstone from Abash's Hearthome Haunters. I think there's a lot to be said here. Ogerpon deserves some recognition for helping a team go from a non-playoff team to a contender this season. And you can see it didn't come in week 1, and then it came throughout the rest of the season and was very productive in almost every single game it came to. And in the games they lost, Ogerpon only had 1 KO. So I think that goes to show that Ogerpon was a big part of the winning on this team. And this is definitely like the coolest Ogerpon to do good with, because I think it's like the worst one, typically. So shout out to Abastra for using it well and picking up a lot of KOs with it. 12-3 is really great stuff. And yeah, that's big for our first Rookie of the Year. Now, Defensive Pokemon of the Year. This is where we get to the real serious awards. We got Porygon 2 from Wisdom's Atlanta Braviaries, Glowbro from Dunkasino's Blue Fishes, and Florges from Wacka's A Chilling Reception. All these Pokemon did great, 8 or more KOs, and were all plus defensive Pokemon, all made first team. Only one of them can be our Depoy, and it is going to be Florges from Wacka's A Chilling Reception. I think it's pretty hard to argue that Wacka doesn't deserve the Depoy. His team was so defensively sound throughout the season and led him to that number 1 seed. Same as Alamamola helped Steven get the number 1 seed last season. Florges was in here doing that for Wacka this season. You can see we got the full art card for the first time ever here on the left with Florges, signed by Florges. You can see, look at the consistency of Florges. Every single game had a KO, even in the losses, and never got more than 2. That's extremely balanced, racked up 10 KOs throughout the season, and a 6-1 record. Very cool stuff in all 7 of the games it came to. Yeah, Florges is your second ever Depoy. Now, we've got Coach of the Year. Your nominees are IDFK Ryan, who is the number 2 seed, Abashta, who is the number 3 seed, and Wacka, who is the number 1 seed. Of course, you know why Wacka's here. Number 1 seed. I mean, all these are the top 3 seeds, but I do think it should be said that Abashta made such a big jump from last season to this season that's why he definitely earned a nominee for me. And yeah, your winner is going to be Wacka. Wacka is your Coach of the Year. Hard not to give it to him for going 7-1 plus 21. Having just a fantastic season with such a balanced team all the way throughout. And it's definitely our Power Ranks number 1 going into these playoffs. Very excited to see how these playoffs shake out, but Wacka is currently our favorite. He built just such a defensively sound team, and I think there wasn't a lot of high tier Pokemon on this team, especially ones that did well. and he managed to make this team look really, really good. The Pokemon we thought was going to do good, Diggersby, didn't end up quite being that. And Starmie and Roaring Moon didn't have as much of an impact as I expected, but it was just a really defensively sound team between Aggron, Thundy, Florges, Quillfish. I think were really the true highlights of this team. So shout out to Waka. Also, one of the more inventive and creative coaches we have in this league, brings a lot of really cool stuff from time to time. And he won Heat of the Year last year. So I think that's even more credit to why I think he deserves Coach of the Year. And that leads us to our final single award, the coveted Most Valuable Pokemon MVP. Your candidates are Chien-Pao from Sam's Go City Go-Goats, Sinistcha from Ryan's Reggie Spice, and Ogerpon Cornerstone from Bash's Hearthome Hunters. All of these Pokemon, I think, have succinct cases to be your MVP, but only one can be chosen. I've already talked about all these Pokemon throughout this video. 2 have already won awards. Your MVP is Chien-Pao for Sam's Go City Go-Goats. This thing was highly productive throughout the season. I think going into Week 8, I was actually leaning against Chien-Pao and maybe in a different direction, but how can you argue against a 6-0 in Week 8, racking up 17 KOs, most in a single season? The number 1 overall pick 2 seasons in a row really comes through and was really strong. Sam used it great. And I think, another thing that I thought was interesting while delving into the stats is you can see in the Week 3 and Week 7 loss, Chien-Pao couldn't get it going and the team lost. So I think that really goes to show how important Chien-Pao is to this team's winning success. If Chien-Pao can't get it going, then this team can't win as often. Every single other game, though, 2 or more KOs, and of course the 6-piece in Week 8. And Chien-Pao is your second ever MVP, and I believe is now already the Supreme 7-Star Draft League all-time kill leader when combining kills from both seasons. So, very cool stuff. Now, with all of those awards out of the way, we will get into some of the preseason betting odds. I'll try and race through them because we got a bunch of them to go through. But if you remember filling out the Google Forms before the season, lots of over-unders, which we're going to go over. Starting with John and the Edmonton Emolgas, his line was set at 3.5. I'll kind of use this one as an example. On the right is this pie chart, which is based on what you guys voted. I believe there were 12 votes for every single team-ish. There was a couple of people forgot to do some of them, so some of them won't match out to exactly 12. Anyways, red will always represent people who bet the under. Blue will always represent people who hit the over. So 75% of people bet the under on John, and he did get only 3 wins, so he did hit the under. But I think it was a pretty good line. And we'll see about next season for John. Next, we've got Chickadee. Definitely my worst line. I set him at 5.5. I thought, this was really going to be a great season out of this team. And 58% of you guys agreed with me, but he only managed to bring in 1 win, so 41% of you guys got this one right, under 5.5. Next, we've got Abashta and the Hearthome Haunters, another team that blew my projections out of the water. I gave him a line of 3.5. He got 6 this season. 50% of people get this one right. Next, we've got Phoenix and the Toronto Typhlosions. He also beat my line, 3.5. He goes 4 wins over, makes the playoffs. 33% of people get this one right. Next, we've got Wisdom and the Atlanta Braviaries. He beats my line of 2.5. 91% of people said he would get the over, and he hits it. He hit it in Week 8, but he gets there nonetheless. And then Power Fibble and the Joltik Jewels had a line of 3.5 after being a 4-win team last season, I believe. Maybe a 3-win. He only gets 2 wins this season, so 66% of people get this one right. And then we got Dunkasino and the Bluefish. It's always a little bit tougher to set the line for new coaches, but I think 2.5 was a solid line. He goes just barely under with only 2 wins. 58% of people get this one right. Next, we got Wystrom and the Aussie Arcanines, another new coach. He had a line of 3.5, and he blew it out of the water with 5. 75% of people get this one right. Sam in the Ghost City Go-Goats, he had a line of 4.5. I think that was a tough line, and he beat it. 5 wins, he hits the over. 50% of people get this one right. And then we've got Squidbird and the Burger Shell Shrimps. This line was set for a previous coach, so I think that's, some context to be added, but the 41% under hits with only 3 wins this season. But, can't really blame Squid picking up this team with such a bad record. It is what it is. Our next team is Ryan in the Red Eye Spice, had a line of 5.5, and he goes 7 wins, so he hits the over. 58% of people get this one right. And then we've got McGriddleso in the Bronx Bombers, had a line of 4.5. He only finishes with 4 after his loss in week 8. 50% of people get this one right, hitting the under there. And then we got Whack in the Chilling Reception, had a line of 5.5. 58% of people hit this one right, hit the 7 on the over. And lastly, we've got me with a line of 5.5. I only got 4 this season, so 33% of people doubted me and were correct. And now we've got a couple more other betting odds to look over. The kill leaders, I had you guys vote on these ones as well. Chien Pao had an over-under of 8.5. Of course, it exactly doubled that. He got 17, just despite me. 83% of people chose the over on this and got it right. Iron Bundle had an over-under of 7.5 kills, only got 5. So it hits the under with Chickadee. And then Dragapult for Squidbird had an over-under of 7.5, only managed to pick up 2. Of course, there was some, coaching changes in there. So maybe that's why Dragapult underperformed, although Dragapult's just kind of a fraudmon. And then our last thing is we got forfeits and new playoff teams. Our forfeits over-under was 3.5. We technically had 0 forfeits with scheduling, although you could maybe call it 1. But 83% of people got the under correct. We did have a mid-game forfeit. Just 1, though. But it wasn't in scheduling, so I'm not really counting it. Either way, it doesn't really matter, but very proud of you guys. Thank you for playing your games. And then for new playoff teams, I thought this was a hard line to set, but it looks like I did it pretty good. 2.5 new playoff teams, and we had 3 of them. Abasha, Ystream, and Phoenix are our new playoff teams this season compared to last season. 41% of people correctly guessed we would have over 2.5. And that leads us with our last thing, just to look at the playoff matchups as we go into the playoffs this weekend. We've got the number 1 seed Waka versus Phoenix. He had the first pick to choose his opponent, and he chose the 8 seed Phoenix. You will notice also that I didn't have to do any reseeding. All the playoff matchups are actually as if we didn't do any weird stuff. So maybe that means the standings actually showed. I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, Waka versus Phoenix in round 1. Sam versus Ystream will play the winner of that game. I think Sam versus Ystream 2 5-3 teams. This will be a very fun, close matchup. One of my favorite games I'm looking forward to. If I was doing my primetime game, it would definitely be that game. And on the other side, we've got 2 rematches. IDKF Ryan. Oh no, I did that wrong. I'm just seeing it now. Anyways, Ryan is going against McGriddleso, 7-1 versus 4-4. Yeah, this is a rematch they just played in week 8 where Ryan took him down, but he brought Rapidash. I don't know if that's happening in the playoffs. We'll see. But yeah, rematch of week 8 I think is super interesting, and the winner of that game will play the winner of Abasha versus Jaden, which is a week 1 rematch where Abasha infamously froze me with Inteleon to seal the game when it was coming down to the wire, and we'll see if something like that happens again. Please don't freeze me. But yeah, I think this will be a very fun playoffs. We've got 7 games of Season 2 remaining, so very excited to see how this shakes out and who can win this one. Thank you guys so much for watching the awards ceremony for Season 2, especially if you made it all the way here to the end. But yeah, I appreciate all you guys for playing this season. Please apply again next season, especially for those of you who got eliminated already. So thankful for you guys. So thankful for all you guys for playing your games, tuning into this stuff, being participatory in the Discord, and yeah, overall just being great people. Thanks, guys.